past, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to roll-out facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast, where we cut through dairy industry noise to get you the insights that actually matter for your operation.
And today, we're diving deep into a feature piece that's got some serious buzz. This one's got layers that'll make every farmer rethink their approach to genetics and growth strategy for the next 5 years.
Okay, let's just jump right into this, because the whole vibe in the industry right now, it feels pretty positive.
Deceptively so.
Exactly. I mean, we should be celebrating, right? We got some huge wins. Federal milk marketing order reform actually passed.
Yep.
The DMC safety net got extended out to 2031. And, the big one, nearly $11 billion in new processing capacity either came online or, broke ground in 2025.
It really does sound like we should be taking a victory lap.
It does.
But that's the danger, isn't it? When I read through this analysis, it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt more like a warning flare shot across the bow of the entire industry.
Yeah. Because the core argument here is that all these wins, they're basically built on sand. They don't actually solve the real underlying structural problems.
Right. The piece argues that these successes are being completely undermined by three specific forces that are all colliding at the same time.
And they're not separate issues. That's the key. They all interact.
So you have force number one, which is that 800,000 head heifer deficit.
Right.
That's a biological problem you can't just throw money at.
Right.
Then you have the second force, the massive processor overcapacity driven by that $11 billion we just mentioned.
And third?
The FMMO reform. It permanently repriced what quality milk actually is by changing those component benchmarks.
And what's really fascinating, and frankly a little scary, is that the analysis says these forces are already widening the gap between the farms that get this and the ones that don't.
We're not talking pennies either.
No, we're talking spreads that could be over $1 per hundredweight. $1.
A dollar spread day in and day out for 3 years on every single hundredweight you ship. I mean, that's the difference between refinancing the farm and having a liquidation sale.
And the timing here is what makes it so critical. The paper is crystal clear on this. The window to gain leverage, to rebuild your genetics, to lock in a good deal with your processor.
That window is narrow. It slams shut after 2027.
The second that heifer shortage corrects itself, all that leverage just flips right back to the processor.
Exactly.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to connect all the forces laid out in this analysis. We'll map out the three viable paths a farmer can take and give you a framework to make decisions in this really narrow window.
We're taking that celebratory industry narrative and turning it completely inside out. We're going from press releases to a real hard balance sheet reality check.
So let's dive in with the biggest constraint of all. The simple fact that we don't have enough cows.
Let's do it.
So this is the real choke point, isn't it? Because you can buy steel, you can buy feed. Capital can solve a lot of problems.
But you can't pay biology to speed up.
And that 800,000 head heifer deficit, the analysis says it is absolutely locked in. There's no escaping it.
It's locked in because the decisions that caused it already happened. They happened back in 2022 and 2023.
Right.
That's the tough lesson in dairy, Today's shortage was baked in by breeding decisions made 2 years ago. The USDA cattle inventory report from January 25, it confirmed it. Dairy replacement numbers dropped to a shocking 3.9 million head.
I got to put that in context. 3.9 million, that's down almost 18% from 2018 levels.
Yeah.
That's not just a little dip in the cycle. That is a structural gut punch to the whole replacement pool.
It is. And Cobank's modeling shows that number is going to keep shrinking, or at best stay flat for the next 2 years. We won't even start to see a real rebound until late 2027.
So that 800,000 deficit isn't some forecast. It's the reality of heifers that just weren't born.
Exact.
And what drove those decisions? It was a short-term cash decision that honestly...
Oh, it was simple economics. During a really high-cost period, farmers just looked at the prices.
Right.
They were breeding 60, sometimes 70% of their herd to beef semen because those beef-on-dairy calves were bringing in a huge premium. We're talking $1,200, even $1,800 a calf.
And a straight dairy bull calf was what, $50?
$50 if you were lucky. I remember hearing guys say, I can't afford not to breed to beef.
Sure. For a big operation, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in immediate cash flow.
It is. But those short-term choices created this long-term hole we're all living in now.
And this just slams home that brutal timeline. Even if you switch back to 100% sex dairy semen today.
The clock is ticking. You have a biological reality of 27 months to first calving.
9 months gestation plus, what, 18 to 24 months to freshen?
Best case. So the supply won't feel healthy again until mid to late 2028. You just can't rush it.
So let's just scale that for a second. If you're running, say, an 800 cow herd, you need around 280 to 300 heifer calves a year for a normal replacement rate.
Right, about 35%.
If you dropped your dairy breeding down to just 30% of the herd because you were heavy on beef, you might have only banked 80 or 90 dairy heifers that year.
That's a 200 heifer hole for just one farm for 1 year.
Now multiply that across 9 million cows nationally. You see how we got to an 800,000 head deficit really fast.
And this is where it really hits home on the farm. It's why the culling math is completely flipped on its head. This shortage is forcing good farmers to make, what are really uneconomic decisions.
Okay, so talk to me about that marginal cow. The one you've been meaning to ship for 6 months, chronic mastitis, always a high cell count.
That cow. Right now, she's still worth decent money as a cull cow, maybe $2,200, $2,400.
Which sounds pretty good.
It does, but you can't look at that number by itself. If you ship her, her replacement is now going to cost you over $3,000.
Maybe $3,500 if you want good component genetics.
Exactly. So you ship her, and you are instantly $600 to $1,300 in the hole just to maintain your herd size.
So you're actually paying a penalty just to try and improve your herd's efficiency.
That's why the whole calculation changes. It's better, from a cash flow perspective, to keep her for one more marginal lactation, even if she's inefficient. You get a little income, and you save a huge capital outlay.
Short-term cash flow wins again.
It wins over long-term genetic improvement every time.
But keeping those marginal cows has to be dragging down the whole herd's average, right? I mean, you're suppressing turnover.
Absolutely you are. And that's the structural drag we're talking about. The USDA slaughter data, it backs this up completely. Dairy cow slaughter has been trailing year-ago levels for 94 of the last 100 weeks.
Wow.
Farmers are delaying the inevitable. And when you do that, the whole national herd average for production, for components, it gets dragged down by these older, less efficient cows.
And that same reality, it just blows up the math for any kind of expansion too.
Oh, completely. If you were planning a 250 cow expansion at $3,000 a head for heifers, you now need almost double the capital you budgeted just a few years ago.
And the lenders see that.
Lenders see that and they say, nope, the ROI isn't there. The pencil just doesn't work. The only guys still expanding are doing it differently. They're either getting more milk out of the cows they already have, chasing 26,000 pounds, or they're buying fresh cows, which has its own whole set of risks.
So this makes your breeding decision not just about farm management. It's a critical capital allocation choice now.
You can't afford to waste a $40 straw of sex semen on a low merit cow who's just going to give you a daughter that underperforms on the new component standards.
So what's the new logic? The analysis talks about a new breeding strategy that the really progressive herds are using.
It's all about discipline, and it requires genomic testing.
Yeah.
This isn't just an idea on a spreadsheet. You need separate semen tanks, clear protocols. It's a whole system.
Walk me through it.
It's sort of a 40-40-20 rule. You use your high-end sex dairy semen on the top 40% of your herd. These are your genomic multipliers. They're the future of your herd's components.
Okay.
Then you use conventional dairy on the middle, 40%. Conception rates are usually a bit better, so you're making sure you hit your baseline replacement numbers. The genetics aren't elite, but they're solid.
And the beef semen only goes on the bottom 20%.
Strictly for genetic purging. You get that cash flow bump from the valuable calf, but you are guaranteeing that the genetics you absolutely do not want in your future herd are not passed on. It's a strategic exit for those animals.
So the producers who thought this was just a temporary price spike are now realizing that biology, it just doesn't negotiate.
Not at all.
Okay, let's pivot now to the other side of this equation, the capacity side.
This is where it gets really interesting, because this is where all the leverage for the producer is right now. We just laid out a supply problem that's locked in for 30 months.
And at the exact same time, the processing industry built a massive multi-billion-dollar demand problem for itself. It's the ultimate mismatch. The irony is just staggering. By mid-2025, we added enough capacity to process almost 20 million more pounds of milk per day. $11 billion. To put that into perspective for everyone, that's enough new stainless steel to process about 1 out of every 10 gallons of milk produced in the entire country.
The scale is just hard to get your head around. Chobani's building that $1.2 billion plant in New York to handle 12 million pounds a day.
Darigold opened their billion-dollar facility in Washington for 8 million pounds a day. It's everyone. Hillamar, California dairies.
And they were all pouring concrete based on forecasts that are now completely, utterly wrong.
They built all this assuming that historical milk growth, that 1.5% to 2% a year, would just go on forever.
But these plants, they need to run at 85% utilization just for the investment to make sense.
And then biology, like we just said, stepped in and just vetoed all those assumptions. The milk pipeline is kept.
And it's shrinking until late 2027 at the earliest.
So CoBank's analysis basically confirms it. The leverage has completely shifted. They built for growth right when supply hit a wall.
Which makes any producer who can reliably ship quality milk. You're not just a supplier anymore. You're a necessity.
So what does that desperation look like on the ground? I mean, they're not going to put out a press release saying, hey, we're only running at 60% capacity.
No, but they signal it with their behavior. The first sign is their recruitment radius.
Right.
If a plant used to get all its milk from, say, a 100-mile radius, and now their field reps are making calls 3, 4, even 500 miles out.
That's desperation. They're eating huge hauling costs just to keep the lines running.
And if you're the farm that's only 50 miles away from that plant, and they're spending all that money to get milk from 400 miles away, you are their lowest cost, lowest risk option.
That's maximum leverage.
Maximum. And the analysis points to some really tangible signs of this. We're seeing real volume bonuses, consistency premiums.
And multi-year price floors. That's a big one. Contracts with floors well above the pool price. We're hearing about 20, even 30 cents per hundredweight being built into multi-year deals.
30 cents per hundredweight on a 50,000-pound daily average. That's over 50 grand a year.
That's real money. That pays for a herdsman or your semen bill.
But the most revolutionary thing we're seeing, and the analysis really highlights this, is the co-financing.
Let's follow the money on that. Why on earth would a processor finance a farmer's herd?
Because they can get capital way cheaper than a farmer can. They're huge corporations. They can borrow at 4 or 5%.
And the average farmer is looking at, what, 7, 8, 9% for an equipment loan?
If they're lucky. So the processor is using their cheaper cost of capital as a tool to lock in their milk supply.
So they're basically saying, we'll be your bank for these new heifers or for that new robot, but you have to guarantee that milk to us through 2028.
Exactly. They're offering to co-finance at, say, 5.5% in exchange for a reliable multi-year commitment for high-component milk.
It solves two huge problems at once. The processor gets their plant utilization up from 65 to maybe 78%, which makes their numbers work.
And the producer gets the high-quality genetics or the automation they desperately need at a much lower capital cost. It's a powerful alignment.
But, and this is a huge but, the analysis warns this opportunity is temporary.
Absolutely. The second those replacement inventories start to rebuild in late 27, early 28, once supply finally catches up to all that new stainless steel,
The leverage pendulum just swings right back.
it swings right back.
Yeah.
They won't need to offer 30-cent bonuses or co-financing when they've got 20 other farms knocking on their door.
So the window for producers to lock this stuff in, to secure a real partnership, and to use that cheaper capital, it's right now.
It's fleeting. And the smart producer is using this moment to fix their structural future.
Okay, so while all this supply and demand chaos is happening, the actual economics of what's in the tank changed permanently on December 1st, 2025.
Yeah, this is the FMMO component factor change. And it might be the biggest structural shift that nobody's really ready for.
This wasn't just a small tweak, was it?
No, this was a permanent repricing of milk for the entire industry. For decades, the protein standard in the formula was 3.1%.
And that moved up to 3.3%.
Right. And that wasn't an arbitrary number. The old 3.1 standard was scientifically out of date. Modern cheese plants, which drive the Class 3 price, they get their best yield and efficiency with milk that's closer to 3.3% protein.
So the pricing just finally caught up with the reality of the manufacturing process.
Exactly. So if you're shipping milk that meets or beats that new 3.3 standard, you're finally getting paid more accurately for the value you're providing.
But if you're below it, say you're still at 3.0, you're getting benchmarked against that higher bar every single month.
And the financial hit is immediate, and it compounds. The folks at University of Wisconsin ran the numbers. And the spread between a low-protein herd and a high-protein herd, we're talking 3.4 or 3.5%, can easily be over $1 per hundredweight.
That's before you even factor in butter fat. $1 a hundredweight on 1 million pounds of milk a month. That is $10,000 a month you're leaving on the table.
$120,000 a year. Every year.
And this gets us to the trap, doesn't it? The old mindset of, our milk has always been good enough, or we're a volume operation.
That mindset is dead. For the last 20 years, you could kind of make up for lower components with sheer volume. Scale gave you leverage.
Not anymore. If your neighbor is running 3.4 protein and 4.1 fat, they are stacking an extra $1.25, $1.50 per hundredweight on every single load.
They're running fewer cows with higher efficiency per cow and way lower overhead for every pound of component they ship. You are structurally outcompeted, and it doesn't matter how big your barn is.
Okay, so let's talk about the timeline to fix this. Can you fix low components with genetics?
Yes, you can. But you need a lot of patience and a serious capital commitment. It's tough for farmers who are used to managing on a 12-month cycle.
And the source material is pretty sobering on this. It lays out a 4 to 6 year journey, and that's if you do everything right.
It is. So years 1 and 2, you're just spending money, you're buying the premium component-focused semen, you're starting to genomic test your whole herd, and you're just waiting for those better daughters to be born.
Years 3 and 4, the first wave of those heifers finally freshens. Your herd average might start to creep up from 3.0 to maybe 3.15%.
So you've made progress, but you are still way behind the new 3.3 standard.
So you won't even get close to that new benchmark until year 5 or 6. And that's only if you are absolutely ruthless about your breeding and culling strategy.
Right. It's a long-term commitment. You have to be willing to spend the money now for a return that's way down the road.
The other option is to just buy your way out of the problem, which is faster, but
it requires a massive immediate pile of cash. The high component heifers are trading in that same 3,000 plus range. Maybe 3,500, 4,000 for the really elite ones.
So if you have a 1,200 cow herd and you need to replace half of it to fix your average, you're talking about millions of dollars in animal purchases right now.
Which is why the analysis says the FMMO changes didn't create the problem of poor genetics. They just exposed it and made it financially fatal.
Which brings us to the toughest question in the entire analysis. When does the math tell you to just get out?
I mean, if you're running a low component herd, and you realize it's going to take you, say, mid-6 figures over the next 5 to 7 years just to get back to average.
And your break even on that investment is almost a decade away, and you're carrying a lot of term debt.
Exactly. If you're in your late 50s, maybe early 60s, you don't have a clear successor. Is grinding for 10 more years just to get back to parity the smartest financial move you can make?
It's a really hard, honest conversation you have to have. An orderly, strategic exit right now, while land and cattle and facilities still have good value.
That might be a much better financial decision than a prolonged high-cost fight just to stay in the game. It's the difference between a controlled sale and a forced liquidation. And the new component pricing, it's forcing that conversation to happen today.
So let's talk about the macro environment for a second. The Fed lowering interest rates into that 4.25% range, that's a huge factor here.
The timing is critical. You have this cheaper money coming in right when all these structural forces, the need for genetics, the need for automation, are hitting their peak.
So cheaper money doesn't save a bad business, but it can really turbocharge a smart one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where does that cheaper debt really create an advantage? It's not in just building a bigger barn, which we already said is too expensive. It's in financing the fix.
Yeah.
The component fix and a labor fix.
Right. Financing those competitive genetics. If you have to spend, I don't know, $1 million over 5 years to get your components up to par, the fact that you're paying 5% interest instead of 8%.
It shortens your payback period by years.
Yeah.
It makes that huge investment actually pencil out.
And this comes right back to that processor-backed capital we talked about.
Exactly. Their capital is cheap and their need for your milk is high. If they can co-finance your automation project or your genetics at 5.5%, they get their milk And you get a huge competitive edge. It's a powerful alignment you have to exploit.
And this makes the ROI on automation look completely different too, especially with how tight the labor market is.
Oh, it's critical. The analysis had some pretty grim numbers on labor.
In the Northeast, you're looking at $18-20 an hour for a skilled milker, if you can even find one.
And in the Southwest, you're competing with construction and the energy sector for workers. It's just as tough.
So think about the math on a robotic milking system. Let's say it's $500,000.
When interest rates were at 8%, the ROI was borderline. Maybe a 6 or 7 year payback.
But you drop that financing to 5% and you factor in that you're eliminating 2 full-time employees at $20 an hour plus benefits.
That's 80 grand a year in labor savings right there. The payback suddenly drops to, 3.5 or 4 years. It's a no-brainer.
You're solving your labor problem and your capital cost problem at the same time. The cheap money is the catalyst.
Now let's pivot to exports, because this is a bit of a paradox. We saw U.S. dairy exports hit $8.2 billion in 2024. The headline just screams, U.S. dairy is strong.
Okay, wait. I have to put on the farmer hat here. The news says $8.2 billion in exports. How can record sales possibly be a bad thing? Help me square that with Class 3 futures struggling through 2025.
That's the paradox. The fine print shows that export strength is often just good PR for an oversupply problem.
Meaning,
if your domestic consumption is slowing down, where does all that extra milk go? It has to be exported. We saw U.S. milk output grow, 4% in some months, but domestic demand only inched up 1 or 2%.
So that extra 2 or 3% surplus had nowhere else to go. You had to push it onto the world market.
At a discount, exactly. When your production growth is consistently outpacing your domestic demand, you're basically masking an oversupply issue that's dragging down your domestic price. We're selling cheap, non-fat, dry milk and whey just to clear the shelves.
So we have to understand the difference between structural, demand-driven exports that actually help.
Right. Mexico's the perfect example of that. They have a dairy deficit. We have the USMCA trade deal. We have a huge logistics advantage. They take about a third of our exports. That's stable trade you can build a business plan around.
Versus the supply-driven exports that are actually a warning sign, pushing surplus powder into places like China or Southeast Asia.
When tariffs change, or when Europe has a good year, that U.S. surplus has to get discounted even more just to move it. You're just acting as the world's chief supply valve.
So you focus your big capital decisions, the $3,000 heifers, the $500,000 robots on optimizing for those stable structural markets.
Absolutely. The 2026 USMCA review is way more important to your bottom line than some temporary tariff deal in Asia.
Okay, we've covered the structure, the biology, the economics. Now we have to talk about the wild card. The low probability, high consequence event that could just throw a wrench in everything.
The New World screwworm. NWS.
This is a devastating disease that can change your entire operational reality in like 72 hours.
And it's been moving north through Mexico. The real alarm bell went off in September of 2025 when a heifer tested positive in Sabinas Hidalgo. That's less than 70 miles from the Texas border.
It is knocking on the door. And if it crosses that border and gets confirmed in a U.S. commercial herd,
the consequences for cattle movement are immediate and they are severe. You're talking about operational paralysis.
as soon as there's a confirmation, local auctions, feedlots, they just stop taking cattle from that region.
Feeder cattle prices in that zone would just collapse. And within days, APHIS will set up quarantine zones and they'll restrict or just outright ban livestock movement.
So what does that mean in practical terms, freezing cattle as collateral?
It means if your primary source of cash flow is those high-value beef on dairy calves and you suddenly can't move them off the farm, that asset is frozen.
And the bank that's holding the note on your operating loan sees that collateral as being suddenly worthless.
Your risk just skyrockets.
Yeah.
That $1,200 revenue stream can disappear overnight, and you could be without that cash for 60 or 90 days.
So mitigation here is just cheap insurance. You have to be proactive.
First, you have to map out alternative marketing outlets for your cull cows and your beef calves, and they have to be genuinely outside a likely quarantine radius.
And second, you have to stress test your cash flow. Just run the numbers. What happens if that beef calf revenue is delayed by 90 days or cut in half?
And talk to your lender about it now. Don't wait for the crisis. Get a temporary line of credit set up just in case.
Let's shift from the wild card to the safety net. The DMC program got extended to 2031.
Tier 1 was raised to £6 million. You get a 25% discount for long-term enrollment. It's a crucial tool.
But the analysis calls it a mirror. It's either a weapon or it's life support.
Right. If you're a competitive operation, solid components, good efficiency, DMC is a weapon. You max out your tier 1, you take the discount, and you treat it like underpriced catastrophic insurance.
In a bad year, that indemnity payment shores up your balance sheet and lets you stay aggressive while your competitors are pulling back.
But if you're a marginal operation, high debt, low components, you're relying on those DMC checks just to stay afloat. It's life support. It's what's paying your loan interest.
So the move is to use it, but you have to be brutally honest with yourself about why you need it.
If it's just buying you time, you need to use that time to either fix the structural problems we've been talking about or to plan that orderly exit.
Which brings us to the final and most critical part of this, the 3 strategic paths forward. Given everything we've discussed, what are the 3 choices farmers need to make in 2026?
It really comes down to your capital access, your risk tolerance, and where your genetics are starting from.
Okay, path 1, the internal rebuild.
This is the slowest path. It's 5+ years. But it gives you the most control and the most independence. The goal here is to become self-sufficient on replacements.
So you stop relying on buying those $3,500 heifers on the open market.
Exactly. You slash your beef on dairy breeding down to the bottom 10 or 15% just for purging bad genetics. And you strategically use that expensive sex semen on your top cows. It costs you a lot up front in lost beef calf revenue, but it's a long-term insurance policy.
Okay, path 2, processor financed growth.
This is the fastest way to expand and improve, but it's totally relationship dependent. You have to aggressively lean into your processor's desperation.
You offer them what they need most, guaranteed high component volume.
And in exchange, you negotiate a contract that's locked through 2028 with premiums, price floors, and critically, you get them to co-finance your replacements or your automation using their cheap capital. This only works if your processor is really hurting for milk, but if they are, it's a once-in-a-cycle opportunity.
And finally, path 3, the hybrid approach.
This is for the producers who can't just eliminate that beef on dairy income completely, but know they have to improve their components.
So you keep maybe 15 or 20% bred to beef for that cash flow.
Right. You grow enough of your own replacements to cover your baseline needs, and then you selectively buy a few high-end heifers on the outside, maybe with some processor help. You're balancing income, genetics, and capital. It's moderate growth, moderate risk.
The analysis makes it really clear, though. By 2028, the difference between a farm being competitive and planning its exit will come down to the decisions you make deliberately in 2026.
The time to pick a path is now. That window is closing.
All right. A farmer just finished milking and is driving to the feed store. What are the 3 immediate, actionable things they need to remember from today's deep dive?
Okay, takeaway number 1, get surgical on genetics NOW.
Immediate action. This week, review your breeding protocols. If you are still putting $40 sex semen in your low-merit cows, stop right now. And if you're not doing it, start genomic testing to find out who your top 40% actually are.
Medium-term strategy, 3 to 6 months. You have to budget for the higher cost of component-focused semen. And you have to redefine your marginal cow. With replacements this expensive, that cow has to deliver real value in the tank, or she's a financial drag you have to get rid of.
Long-term positioning, 1 to 2 years. You have to commit the capital and the discipline to hitting 3.3% protein or higher by 2030. That is the new minimum standard. If you're below that, you're losing money every day.
Takeaway number 2, exploit processor desperation.
Immediate action this week. Get your data together. Know your reliable volume, know your component profile, and find out where your processor is getting your milk from. If their trucks are running 300 miles out, you have huge leverage.
Medium-term strategy, 3 to 6 months. Get on the phone with your field rep aggressively. You need to be negotiating multi-year contracts locked through 2028 with 20 or 30 cent component premiums, and you push hard for those co-financing options. Use their cheap money to fix your farm.
And long-term positioning, 1 to 2 years. Lock in those favorable terms now. Because after 2027, when the heifer numbers start to normalize, that leverage is gone. This window is temporary. Use it.
And takeaway number 3, de-risk the wildcat.
Immediate action this week. If you're in a high-risk region for NWS, you need to map out alternative places to sell your cull cows and beef calves. Places outside the likely quarantine zone.
Medium-term strategy, 3 to 6 months. Stress test your cash flow. Just assume a 90-day delay in your beef calf revenue. Run the numbers, and then go talk to your banker about how you'd manage that gap.
Long-term positioning, 1 to 2 years. build up your cash reserves a little bit, and build up your internal dairy replacement capacity. The less you rely on outside markets and high-risk beef calves, the more flexible and resilient your operation will be.
That structural reality, that $1 per hundredweight efficiency gap, it's permanent now.
The only question is which side of that dollar you're going to land on in 2028.
This has been another Bullvine podcast from the Bullvine Podcast. For more straight-talking industry analysis, head to www.thebullvine.com.
Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. We're out with new episodes every day, and upcoming topics will be maximizing the DMC safety net and new protocols for HPAI biosecurity. We'll see you next time.